So, I guess good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Yana Ovcharenko, and I am an outreach coordinator here at Education USA Ukraine. And let me just remind you that Education USA is your official source on US higher education. So, if you are dreaming of studying in the US universities, but you still find yourself worried about financial part of it, you are in the right place. Because today we are joined by someone who knows everything of this part, Jason Cronk. Yes, a representative of the University of Pennsylvania with nearly 20 years of experience in student recruitment and financial aid. And today, Jason is going to guide us through how funding your graduate degree, and what financial support types are available for international students. And before we dive into the topic, I encourage you to ask all your questions in the chat. At the end of our event, we are going to have a Q&A session, and answer all your questions. So I think that we can start. So Jason, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, and thanks so much, Yana. I will try to live up to that gracious introduction. I do have about 20 years experience in financial aid, though I can't claim that I know everything. I will still do my absolute best. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ukraine. My name is Jason Cronk. I'm calling you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy evening to join us here. I hope this session is going to be helpful as you begin your search for a graduate program. I direct the financial aid and recruitment at the school, and so I have the opportunity to speak with people from around the world on a regular basis, fielding some of the questions, fielding the most common questions that they have. And so today I hope to really build on that experience and share with you what I've learned in my role answering questions from international students from around the world. But as background, the University of Pennsylvania is a private Ivy League university located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are located about 2 hours south of New York City, about 3 hours north of Washington, D.C., on the east coast of the United States. We are the 5th largest city in the United States, and UPenn is one of the oldest universities in America. So where's the deck here? There we go. Great. So today we're going to talk about choosing and funding the best program for you, as there are likely some differences between the US and Ukraine, or whichever country you might be viewing from. There are many reasons to consider a graduate degree, and I hope that today's session helps put your options in context and gives you some advice for beginning your search. Okay. So of course, the first step is to think to yourself why you need a degree. Why do you want a master's degree? Is it necessary to have a master's degree? This is an important question, okay? And it's not one you should take for granted. A master's degree or doctoral degree, either of these are going to require a tremendous effort and an investment of time, energy, and of course, money. So once you have thoroughly evaluated your motivations and abilities, you can begin looking for a program. Now notice, I am inversing the normal order of the search. As an undergraduate, you searched first for a school and then you chose a major, okay? But as a graduate student, you're going to apply to a program more than a school. The reason is that at most US graduate schools, it is the actual program to which you apply that makes the decisions, not a central admissions office like there is at the undergraduate level. At the graduate level, admissions officers are much less like gatekeepers. I don't consider myself a gatekeeper trying to see who can get into the program and who can't. We're much more like matchmakers. Okay? When you apply to a graduate program, we are evaluating your application to see how your interests and abilities align with the purpose of the degree, okay? So if your interests and your abilities align with the purpose of the degree, that is what we call fit. You'll hear this term a lot used by admissions professionals in the United States. And all it really means when someone says fit, that's what they mean. They just mean, how do your interests and abilities align with the purpose of the degree, okay? And so I'll give you an example. One of our programs is in statistics, measurement, and research technology. We call it SMART, right? Because we're clever, right? So the purpose of our SMART degree is to teach you how to understand social phenomenon quantitatively, okay? That's the purpose of the degree. We get hundreds of applications for people who are looking for business analytics, for example. And so this is not a business analytics degree. And so no matter how strong a resume or how strong your GPA or anything like that may be, we can still not admit those students because they do not fit with the program. Their goals are not aligned with the purpose of the degree. And so you notice I'm starting at the very beginning here. When you're looking for a program, you really want to think about what your personal goals are in that program, and then try to find a program that is aligned very much with them and with those goals, okay? And I'm sorry if you hear it on my end. It appears they're doing some maintenance in our building. So if you heard a buzzing, that's what that is. It's very loud here. I hope it's not bothering you. Okay, so moving right along. So notice, first look for the program. Look for the actual program that you're interested in, the type of program. And then once you choose a program, then you look at the school, okay? This is my advice, is you first look for a program and then you look for the school. The program determines the curriculum and the school determines the environment that you're in, okay? So every program is going to have its own curriculum, obviously, but then the school at large is going to really determine the type of environment that you'll be studying in, okay? And I've listed here what I think are really the most important factors when considering a school: the culture of the school, the curriculum, and the community. But if you notice, there's something that I did not list here, okay? And that would be rankings, okay? I did not put rankings on this slide. And that's because I think rankings, and everybody looks at rankings, it's fine, we all do. We go to QS or US News and World Report or any of these, whatever ranking you use, everybody uses them. But here, for what it's worth, here are my 2 cents on what I think and how I consider rankings, okay? Rankings are useful in a broad, generic sense, but I do not believe that they adequately reflect enough information to make a decision based solely on rankings, okay? For example, I do not think that there is a significant difference in quality between a number 1 or a number 10 ranked school. I just don't, okay? Anywhere within these thresholds is going to give you a very solid, excellent education. When you're comparing schools that are fairly close in rank, you need to pay attention to these other factors that I've listed, okay? That's what's going to really drive, and what really should drive, your decision, more than trying to figure out, well, is the number 7 school better than the number 12 school? In that, when they're that close, the ranking is not that different, okay? You're not going to get that much of a difference there, okay? So I guess a question might be, how do you find out? How do you evaluate these sorts of criteria, okay? Well, you need to reach out and ask. Talk to current students, talk to alumni, talk to admissions people. Believe me, we love to talk. It's what we do for a living, and we are very happy to do so. By all means, reach out with any questions you have. I can say that at Penn in general, and remember, we have 12 graduate colleges. I represent one of them. At Penn in general, however, we tend to think of ourselves as having a very strong focus on skills. We're very professionally oriented. For example, we are the only Ivy League school with a nursing program, for example. And the programs at Penn GSE, the ones I represent, they would give you the competence and the confidence to enter your new profession. Okay, that's part that informs the culture of our school, and this is the type of thing that you would want to ask. Okay, graduate school is a great opportunity to build your network because the people in your program are going to be working in your field. So this is a great reason to pursue a degree, and so you want to pay attention to the people who are also going to be pursuing that with you. Pay attention to the alumni. Pay attention to who's going into that program and what they're doing afterwards. That's how you're going to help determine if this is really the right program. And look, I'm saying all this because so many times the conversation comes down to, well, I want to get into the top ranked MBA program. Okay, great, fantastic. Why an MBA? Exactly, precisely. Why exactly that degree, right? It's a fine degree to have, but you really have to answer. Do you want to be a generalist? Is that the question? Pardon me. Yep, sounds like they're doing a little bit of maintenance here in our building. That's always good. They always pick the perfect timing. Any rate, yes. So that's what you want to think about. And then when you're thinking about the overall community, other things to think about are who else is going to be on campus with you. At Penn, we are over 50% graduate students, for example. So there's roughly 20,000 students out on campus. But over half of those students are in fact graduate students. And so that is also going to inform the type of experience that you have. Okay, moving right along, and hopefully without any more fire alarms or whatever on earth that was. I travel around the world, and one of the most common scenarios I encounter is a prospective student who tells me that they want a PhD. It's very common. They come up to me immediately and they say, well, I want a PhD. And the first question I ask them is I say, well, what is your research question? What is the phenomenon you want to research and what do you hope to do? And usually they're vague or somewhat unsure. And an answer like that is going to tell me that that person is probably better suited for a master's at that point in their life. Okay. I've listed some of the main differences between doctoral programs and master programs. I can phrase it another way. Whereas one, I'm sorry, folks, bear with me one moment. Okay, I think that's it. My goodness. So,
Yeah, so I think that Jason is going to fix the problem. And when he's not here, I would like to encourage you to leave all your questions in our chat. Yeah, so if you have any questions about graduate programs, yeah, if you want to get your master's degree, or if you want to pursue PhD, yeah, so just write your questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end of the session. Yeah, so Jason, I hope that now everything is okay.
Yes, my apologies, everyone. Yes, apparently they're doing a fire alarm certification today, so that's helpful. Okay, perfect timing. That's all right. When you work in admissions, you must be adaptable, and that's the name of the game. Okay. So when you're trying to decide between a doctoral program or a master's program, okay, the main consideration is what is your intent and what you hope to do post-graduation, okay? In the United States, a doctoral degree is first and foremost, it is a research degree, okay? It is designed to produce and to make you a professional researcher, okay? A lot of people they'll think to themselves, they'll say, oh, I think I want a PhD, okay? And I say, well, why do you want a PhD? And they'll say, well, it's because it's the top degree, or it's the terminal degree, or something like this, right? Whereas in practice, a PhD is best understood, in my view, as entry-level job training for a career in academia, okay? A PhD represents 4 to 6 years of your life on average. where you are training to become a professional researcher or academic. So you spend 4 to 6 years earning this credential, after which you have the privilege of starting again at the very bottom in your career and working your way up, okay? A PhD is absolutely the correct degree if this is your goal. If your goal is to work in academia or to go into research full-time, then a PhD could be a good option. But for the overwhelming majority of students, a master's degree is going to be a better fit, a better aligned with your goals and with your life. And the reason is because, first of all, most master's degrees are 1 or 2 years in length. Almost all of our degrees at Penn GSE, for example, are 1 year in length. We have a couple that are 2 years, but that's 1 year where you finish, you go in, you come out with hard, concrete skills that you can immediately apply to a job. And so the return on your investment is much, much faster, much higher. And there's no real evidence that people with a PhD earn significantly more than those with a master's. It's just not the case. It's much more about what you hope to do and what your goals are post-graduation, okay? So I think that's just something I like to clarify, because so often I hear people really trying to get that PhD, and I'm always questioning whether that's the right fit given their goals. Okay. So let's take a step back for a second and just think about some reasons you might want to study in the United States, as opposed to Asia or the EU, for example. One reason alone is just the size and the scope of the country. You can see where Philadelphia is located. I described it earlier on, but we have almost 6,000 universities and colleges in the United States. It was around 5,400 last time I looked. And what that means is that there is a school to meet every goal, every motivation, and every budget that you might be working at. Okay, in the U.S., another advantage is that in the U.S., what you studied as an undergraduate does not at all dictate what you study as a graduate student. Okay? And my understanding is that this is quite different from our friends in the UK, for example, where it's expected that whatever you studied as an undergraduate, you would then study at the master's level. Now, sometimes that's the case in the US. Sometimes there are prerequisites. So, for example, if you wanted to become a medical doctor, ostensibly you will have taken science, the regular science courses as an undergraduate, et cetera. But for many programs, especially with the specialized master's degrees, such as I offer at GSE, there is no fixed path in that sense. It's quite common that someone will use a graduate degree to pivot within a career, okay, or to change their path in some way, or they might stay along the same path. Okay, but for example, we have a fair number of people who, for example, studied sociology as an undergrad, and now they want to study applied statistics at our school. And that's because our school allows you, we have programs, like I said earlier, we have programs that are focused on using statistics in social sciences, right? So that's the right fit for them, okay? We have mental health counseling. And so you want to think about these types of programs, okay? When you're looking at location too, all right, when you're considering a college, when you're considering a graduate school, you want to pay attention to the location, because that's going to inform your experience. It's going to influence your experience at that school, okay? UPenn is in the city of Philadelphia. We are an urban campus. We are located directly in the city. Students do not use cars, or it's a major city, and so that's going to give you a very different experience than a school that's located in a rural environment. But the U.S. is huge. We have schools in rural, urban, coastal, mountainous, tropical, subtropical, and even subarctic conditions. Okay, it's really, there's a experience for everyone in the U.S. overall. And then when it comes to price, you've heard that American schools are very expensive. And while, yeah, that can be true, the flip side is that the American model that's used by a lot of schools, not every school does this, but quite a few schools, will charge a higher tuition, but then also at the same time offer very substantial scholarships, okay, at the same time. And that's often something that is not really recognized when students, especially international students, are trying to evaluate the overall cost of a degree, okay? And again, the truth is that some US schools are more expensive than others, okay? But most schools, especially the more expensive schools, are going to also offer more scholarship. That's the trade-off there, okay? So for example, if you were to apply to Penn GSE, we would automatically evaluate you for both merit and need-based scholarships. And those scholarships range from 0 to 100% of funding. So it's a wide range, but it's still worth looking at. So I ended here on price, and this is a good segue to get into what we all came here to talk about, which is money, right? So here we are. So I want you to imagine that you've gone through all this effort that I've just discussed, and now you've decided the right school and the right program and the right options for you. And now you've been admitted, okay? You've been admitted to your dream school at the right program, and now you have to figure out how on earth you're going to pay for it, okay? So let's talk about what that looks like for a lot of international students, or just students in general, okay? Because international students fund their program very similarly to American students. Okay, you might be surprised to hear that, but there's often very little difference ultimately when it comes down to it. But first thing I need to mention is the sticker price versus the net price, because this is different than other countries. Okay, funny thing about the U.S. is that you will not know the cost of a program until after you are admitted. And why is that? So by law, we have to post our sticker price. That is our price before scholarship, okay? We must post that online. So it's part of being transparent and all that good stuff. So we post our tuition and fees online, and you'll see the sticker price. But if a school offers scholarship, they will offer that scholarship after you are admitted, obviously, right? And so you'll apply, you'll be admitted, and then you'll be awarded a scholarship. And your price, your specific price, is going to be the price after scholarship, okay? So if you're admitted and the program is $50,000 US, but then they give you $25,000, well, then you're paying $25,000 for that program, right? And it's as simple as that. But it's something to really keep in mind. And it's important to mention this because so often you'll go to a website and you'll see this price and you'll be intimidated and you'll say, well, there's no point in even applying. And I would just encourage you to say, look, it's worth applying because you could very well get a substantial amount of scholarship. And like I said, our scholarships at GSE range up to 100% of tuition and fees, but you won't know that unless you apply, right? So there's some things to understand. And I say this very at the beginning because that's how you orient what you're looking at when you go to a school's website, okay? The other thing I'll mention is that scholarship organizations just generally, they follow the admissions cycle, okay? So many scholarship applications will open in late August-ish, okay? Sometime around late August, September, and then they'll close sometime in the spring, March, February. And you can just see this by when you start looking for scholarships, you'll see the deadlines are typically in the spring. But it's a funny thing that happens with students is so often you will spend so much time applying to the school and you're making your application for admission that you forget to apply for scholarships too from outside organizations. And so you get your admissions decision in March, let's say, and then by then it's already too late for scholarships. So the takeaway here is that when you start applying for graduate school, start applying for scholarships as well. Okay, do that at the same time. That way, when you're admitted to your dream school, you might have earned some additional scholarship other than what the school offers. Okay. For those of you who are interested in doctoral programs, and I'm cognizant of time here, folks, so I'm going to speed up a little bit to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A. But for those interested in doctoral funding, just understand that there are differences even within doctoral programs, okay? You'll see The PhD, the Doctor of Philosophy in whatever subject, Doctor of Philosophy in psychology or English or education or whatnot, versus the professional doctorates, a Doctor of Education, for example, the EDD, something that we offer, or the Doctor of Psychology, the PsyD. These are common terminal degrees. It's important to distinguish between what might be the what might be the best program for you. I know that at our school, often the difference between someone applying to a PhD versus an EDD has to do with their goals. Again, remember, it all comes down to fit. So a PhD is typically, as I said earlier, someone who is really towards the beginning of their career looking to make a career in academia, whereas a Doctor of Education, the professional doctorate, would often be aligned with someone who is already ensconced in a career, someone who is already in a career. They want to gain more expertise in that career, and so they'll apply for the EDD, typically because it can be done within 2 to 3 years versus 4 to 6, and so it's a little bit different in that sense. But when you're looking at doctoral programs, things to pay attention to are the fellowships and the stipends that might be offered. The top schools in the United States are almost always going to fund your PhD entirely. It's certainly the case at our school. A PhD is funded 100% tuition fees, and then also a living stipend for 10 months. That's very common, okay? We pay you, in other words, to come to the program. Now, the trade-off, of course, is that we are admitting very few students into those programs, okay? So the admission rate is very low on a PhD, given the competitiveness and given just what that looks like. So how do you make yourself competitive for a doctoral program? And then I'll keep moving on here. But to make yourself competitive for a doctoral program, if I had to sum it up into one basic sentence, and I'll compare it with the master's. So remember what I said earlier with the master's degree. When you're writing your statement of purpose, when you're submitting your application, you want to keep in mind, what is the purpose of the degree and how do my abilities align with it, right? That's master's level. At the doctoral level, especially the PhD level, you want to research the faculty at the school that you are applying to, okay? Because all things being equal, let's assume that everybody has the same GPA, test scores, whatnot, okay? All things being equal, whether you get in is often going to be dependent on how your research interests, the phenomena that you want to study, how your research interests align with the expertise of the faculty, okay? Because at the PhD level, you're working one-on-one with a faculty advisor in the United States, okay? In the US, when you apply to a PhD program, you do not typically submit a lit review. You do not normally submit an entire scope of research or anything like that. Because in the US, most PhD programs begin with 2 years of coursework, and then you move into the dissertation phase. Okay, so it's a little different in the UK and other schools, other countries. Okay, but when we're evaluating for applications, we want to know that, okay, the basic question is, great, this is an amazing student, but do we have the expertise in-house to help them, right? That's the question. Do our faculty, are the research interests of our faculty aligned with this student? And so to the extent that you can align your research interests with the expertise of the faculty, that will give you a much stronger application. And I think that holds true at most US schools. I certainly can't say all, like I said, there's several thousand of us, but I would say, yes, at most schools, this is how it would be. And certainly that I would be comfortable saying that that's the case at Penn and its peer institutions. Okay, but moving right along, when you're looking at funding a master's degree, okay, when you're looking at funding a master's degree, whether you are an international student or a domestic student, whatever type of student, it's generally going to fall into these 3 basic categories. And I like to break it down to 3 categories just to make it easy to conceptualize. But there's going to be scholarships, right? There's student employment and there's student loans. These are the 3 categories that students use to fund a master's degree, okay? Now, scholarships. I mentioned earlier that it's a good idea to look for scholarships at the same time that you're applying to schools, okay? Because they often follow the same schedule. In the US, every graduate school is going to offer its own type of scholarship. It's going to have its own protocol for offering scholarships, right? So at GSE, for example, at UPenn GSE, when you apply for admission, we are going to evaluate you for need-based aid. We're going to have you complete a survey. My team will run the numbers and produce a number for that. And then the faculty of the program will read your application for scholarship. And because they are the experts in the field, they will determine, well, who has the stronger applications, right? And those with the strongest applications, that is the closest fit, again, it comes down to fit, are going to generally get a higher merit scholarship. And so then we put both numbers together, your merit plus need. Those two numbers can, like I said, equal up to 100% of tuition fees. Not always. Generally, it's a partial tuition, but nonetheless, we'll put those numbers together. And then when you're admitted, you know exactly how much scholarship you're getting from our school. Okay. Other schools might be a little bit different in their timing. The point is you want to pay attention to that. You want to read the school's website and make sure you understand the timelines and the requirements to be considered for scholarships at the school. Okay. Our criteria is very simple. You just have to be applying to a full-time non-executive master's degree. Okay. Very simple. And then we automatically evaluate you. But other schools might have more criteria. Student employment. This is often very overlooked. Okay. As an international student, you can work on campus at a U.S. school as on your visa. Your visa will allow you to work on campus at a U.S. school. Penn allows you to work up to 20 hours a week. And if someone does work 20 hours a week, they can cover the bulk of their living expenses. Okay. It's possible to cover, maybe not 100% of your living expenses, but a significant amount of your living expenses if you're working that many hours. Now, most of our students are going to work somewhere between 10 to 12, but when you're looking at a graduate school in the US, you want to inquire about work opportunities. Some schools are going to give you tuition remission. Other schools are going to pay you directly as a part-time job. At Penn, we pay you as a part-time job. So you're paid an hourly rate. My school, Graduate School of Education, will pay you $23 an hour. Okay, we pay $23 an hour. And most students, and like I said, you can work up to 20 hours a week. So students are going to do fairly well for themselves if they apply and they seek this type of opportunity. You want to ask this question at any school that you're considering, because every school is going to do it a little bit differently. My goal is to give you insight that this is something you need to pay attention to because it's very overlooked. I see it overlooked everywhere in each cycle that I look at. And then finally, borrowing. Okay, American citizens borrow money from the American government, right? That's how they do it. That's what they do, by and large. Whereas students from other countries will often borrow money from banks in their home country or institutions or family members or GoFundMe. They'll put up something. They have all sorts of things that I've seen. But if you happen to have someone in the United States who's a US citizen who can co-sign, then you can borrow money from an American bank too. That's a possibility, and that might give you better options than what might be available locally. Okay, but if you have a US citizen, most banks in the United States will allow that person to co-sign on a loan for you. And what that means, what co-signing means, is that you as the borrower are responsible for the loan. But if you default on the loan, if you do not pay back the loan, then the person that has co-signed becomes responsible for the loan. So clearly, this is something you would ask of a close friend or family member, probably not just somebody on the street, okay? But it's a significant responsibility. But we always have students that do that, and I always want to make sure that people are aware of that as an option. That's right. I went through this before, but yes, you want to pay attention to every school is going to have its own protocol for applying for scholarships. Quite often, scholarships are stackable. You might hear that term. It just means that they can be combined one on top of the other up to, for example, at our school, it is up to 100%. The majority of schools in the United States, though, are going to offer partial tuition. Okay. The way this often works is there's going to be a handful of students who, through whatever reasons, are able to secure full funding. That's quite rare, The majority of students are going to have partial tuition funding, and that's a pretty wide range. But I'm being very candid here, and that's important. I think it's important that you do not expect to get a full ride. At the master's level, it is very rare. I'm just going to say that. Overall, it's quite rare. It happens, but it's rare. And so I want to set expectations. And the reason I'm saying that is so that you can start right now surveying the area and start looking for scholarships and awards that can supplement whatever the school might be able to offer you, okay? One way you pay attention is, again, to go through the school's website. Pay attention to what they're saying on that website so that you are aware of the opportunities, okay? I've listed some of the scholarships that we offer, but every school is going to be a little bit different, okay? Some schools are going to have scholarships with criteria. So, for example, we have a Fulbright scholarship. So anyone who has earned a Fulbright and is going to use that Fulbright to study at Penn GSE will get at least $25,000. That's a minimum scholarship that we've established. But then they can also get need-based aid on top of that, right? To another 35% or so of tuition. So every website's going to display this information differently. And so it's important that you have that conversation with the financial aid office at the school you're interested in, okay? Do not assume anything. Right, and so moving right along, like I said, having a job on campus, one of the main benefits is that you're able to have work and gain experience in the subject that you're studying. This will help give you something for your resume, for your CV. It'll expand your network, okay? And often help cover your living expenses while you're in that program, which is one of my earlier slides. I mentioned location. Another point to think about is the location of your school very much matters, because living expenses vary widely in the United States, very much so. So, for example, I said that we are about 2 hours by car south of New York City. We are also, by most measures, roughly 100% less expensive than New York City. Okay, so if an apartment costs $3,000 in New York, good luck, by the way, finding an apartment for only $3,000. Ours would cost about $1,500. Okay, so it's quite. It really matters. And of course, you can find a more rural school somewhere that's going to be much less expensive than us as well. So these are all things to consider when you're evaluating a program. And reach out, ask the school, say, what are your costs of attendance there? Okay. It's important to understand living expenses and how that works. When you go to a school's website, you're going to see two charts. You're going to see the tuition and fees. Again, remember, sticker price before scholarship, okay? You're also going to see a chart for living expenses, okay? That throws a lot of people off because usually at the graduate level, these are not billable expenses, okay? So if you were to go to our website, you would see a chart and it would show living expenses of about $27,000 or so, okay? Those are not billable expenses. What the living expense chart means on a school's website, what that means is this is the total amount of money that we would certify to a lender to allow you to borrow for living expenses, okay? It is a very rough estimate, typically on the high end, of what a, quote, typical student would need. That's what that is, okay? So, for example, we might say that the average rent in Philadelphia is around $1,200 a month for a private one-bedroom apartment within 10-minute walk of class. But if you were to get a smaller apartment, a studio, and maybe 20-minute walk away from class, then maybe you're spending $800 a month, $700 a month, right? So there's wide variation in this, okay? When you're looking at a school's website, tuition and fees, living expenses. Tuition and fees is sticker price. Living expenses are just estimates, and you control your own living expenses. So think about that. And some schools will let you live on campus like we have at Penn, where you can be an advisor. This is an opportunity that Penn has, and many other schools offer too, where you work with undergraduate students and they give you free rent in one of the dormitories. So again, lots of options to keep in mind there. Okay. Some schools are going to have different rules for international students, and it's important to ask. Again, do not assume. Okay. Now at Penn GSE, we have no difference. International students are awarded merit scholarships, exactly the same as domestic, same need-based. International students are eligible for need-based, merit-based, GA-ships, exactly the same. The only difference at Penn between an international student and a domestic student is where they borrow money from. Like I said before, Americans borrow money from the American government, international students borrow money from elsewhere. That's it. That is the difference in financial aid at Penn. Other schools are going to have differences, okay? So it's important. Some schools will limit the amount of financial aid for international students. A very common tact is that you'll have certain scholarships set aside for exceptional international students, but then maybe you wouldn't have general scholarships available for all applicants. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind when you're evaluating different schools. And like I said, it's important now to start thinking about if and where you might be able to borrow. Okay. If borrowing is not in the picture, and I understand that. I understand that's a reality for a lot of students. Okay, I'm not dismissive of that. But at the same time, it's important to start thinking about it, because it is a reality for the majority of students that they're going to borrow money from somewhere, some amount. Now, the goal, of course, is to cover as much as you can with scholarship and then student employment and these two things. But it's a good idea to start thinking, is it possible? If I had to, would I be able to borrow money? And if so, how much? And if not, then when you apply to your schools, right, you start that process now thinking, so that when you get your admissions decision, and you'll have 4 or 5 admissions decisions back, because you're all going to apply to at least 4 or 5 programs, right? So you'll have these decisions, and then you'll be able to evaluate. Then you can start evaluating based on cost, okay? But evaluating on cost is really one of the last steps that you would do, because you just don't know what type of scholarships you might be eligible for, and you don't want to shut down any opportunities that you might have by not applying to a school, right? I said this, yeah, if you have a U.S. cosigner, that's a possibility. There are also lenders that there are also non-banks that will lend to international students. Companies such as Prodigy is a very common company that we're aware of. Prodigy and Empower, that's NPOWER, is a common lender that we see. They will lend to international students without a U.S. cosigner and without needing U.S. credit. However, their interest rates are high. So I would not use them except to cover maybe the last small gap in your budget. Most of our students are using those lenders for somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000. It's just enough to cover that final gap to allow themselves to get in there. I'll say one more thing about loans. It's not part of my deck, but I think it's important in saying this, okay? When you're applying for a visa to the United States, okay, part of that visa application is going to be to secure an I-20, okay? An I-20 is the first step. Now, the I-20 document, it's a U.S. government document, and on that, with that document, you need to be able to show that you have assets, that you have the means of covering the price of your program, okay? You can use a loan that has been approved, an approved loan. You can use that as part of the requirements for the I-20 document. So for example, the school that you are admitted into will tell the U.S. State Department, they will say, okay, this program requires $50,000 in tuition and say $20,000 in living expenses. And so you as the student would need to show $70,000 liquid assets to cover the cost of the program. And just so you're aware, you can use Scholarship notices, they can count. Okay, so if you have a scholarship letter, you can submit that. If you have an approved loan, you can submit that as well. And then of course, any cash that you have in your account can be counted as well. It cannot be money in your uncle's account. It cannot be money in a family account. It has to be in your bank account, liquid cash. You cannot use employment. You cannot use like student employment for this, or salary statements or anything like that. It has to be liquid. So a little bit of an aside, but since I'm speaking to folks in Ukraine, I thought it would be good just to mention that too as an FYI. But once you've gotten your admissions decision, you'll get your financial aid decision. Then what you need to do, and I say this will be the last thing I say before Q&A, because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. The last thing I'll say is every school is going to present its information differently, okay? Some schools are only going to show you a partial budget, okay? They'll say, oh, this is the budget for 2 semesters at our program. But if your program is 4 semesters, you need to do the math, go in and add up the entire cost. I know this sounds obvious. I'm only saying it because this is a routine question that I get from American students, okay? It's actually more American students, to be honest, that I have this conversation with. Most international students are pretty savvy about this, okay? But I just have to say, look, you have to make sure you're looking at the entire cost of your program, all right? Not just the sample semester that they send you to have you apply, okay? Make sure you look at the full price of the program when evaluating it. Look at the length of the program. Most of our programs are 1 year in length. That will be less expensive than a 2-year program because you're not paying for 2 years of living expenses, right? Things like that. Those are the things to consider. Okay. I'm going to skip through this because I want to make sure, but it is an investment. You should do it. It's good for you. We could talk about this one-on-one. And then finally, that's that. My apologies for the maintenance crew that stormed through my house earlier. That was a bit unexpected, but hopefully it wasn't too much of a disturbance. Yana, that's all I've got. I have this QR code here. If you want more information about Penn GSE specifically, please scan it. There will be a brief little registration form that you can fill out. If you don't know what program you're interested in, that's fine. Just pick any of them. That will work. We will get you sorted and get you to the right department to answer your questions. But with that, and I'm willing to go over too, if you have time. I have a little bit of time to go over a little bit, Yana, just given the unfortunate interruption we had. But yes, Q&A, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So, our dear students, it's time for your questions. And Jason, thank you so much for such a great presentation, for your adaptability and flexibility. We really appreciate it. Yeah, and I think that you actually highlighted a lot of very important moments that our students have definitely take into account when they consider applying to the master's or doctoral programs. Thank you for that. And I see that in the chat, we already have a few questions. First questions are from Violetta. I think that Sasha can help me to show them on the screen. So yeah, hi, I'm a first-year finance economics student in a small private school in Illinois. My goal is to go to a Wharton after graduation. What are specific steps I should already be taking?
Yeah, good question. And so I'm assuming you mean for the MBA program then. So I can answer it accordingly. So good question. And I'm going to expand my answer just for the benefit of everyone on the call. Okay. So remember what I said earlier. What is the purpose of a program? So what is the purpose of an MBA, right? An MBA is a generalist degree that's going to teach you leadership. It's going to give you skills in leadership. It's designed for those who are seeking management roles typically, right? It's going to be a survey of different courses. So of course, finance and accounting and organizational leadership and whatnot. When you're looking at a particular program, you want to understand exactly what the focus of that degree is. Now, I do not work for Wharton, okay? I work for Penn, but it's a separate admissions team, like I said. So I won't speak too specifically to their program. I don't want to step on anyone's toes at Wharton, but what I'll say is that generally they are looking, I do understand their basic profile, someone who has generally at least 3 to 5 years of experience. Many of their students come from or are interested in working in consulting, management consulting, tech, and finance are very common paths for Wharton students. They've been growing their nonprofit leadership capacity, is my understanding. So there are some interesting nuances there. But I think having a conversation with someone from the school that you're interested in is going to give you a much clearer path, and you'll develop some good insights in learning about that specific school, especially with a program like an MBA, because an MBA is somewhat like a commodity degree, right? Everyone understands what an MBA is in general. But that can be deceiving because there are differences, and significant differences, in the culture and the orientation between MBA programs. Okay, so it's even though you might think you know what an MBA is, because everyone sort of knows what an MBA is, right? You know what that means. Likewise with engineering, right? People have a general understanding. You say, I'm a chemical engineer. It's like, okay, great, I get it. But even with these types of programs, it's really important to have that conversation, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Jason. Yeah, so thank you for your answer. Next question is also from Violetta, and I think that you have already partially answered it, but there is kind of like important clarification, I believe. So Violetta asks, when do the applications for master's programs open?
Yeah, good. It's a fine question. Yeah. So, So pay attention to the school's communications, because every school is different. Okay. And let me be clear when I say school. University of Pennsylvania is one university out of thousands in the United States. Okay. There is no single set application deadline for the University of Pennsylvania, because the University of Pennsylvania is comprised of 16 different colleges. 12 of them are graduate colleges, and they're all completely separate. But wait, there's more. Even within the graduate colleges, there are different programs. Remember I said first, you're applying to a program, not a school, right? Every program might have a different deadline. So for example, even at my school, the Graduate School of Education, which is education and related applied social sciences, just to be clear as to what we offer here, right? But even there, we have different deadlines for different programs. So it's imperative that you pay attention to the precise program that you're looking at. And then also look at in your case, Violetta, look at the alumni coming out of the program. Go to LinkedIn, see what they're doing, see what kind of careers they're into, see when they went to school and what that looks like. It's rarely is it a fixed and firm cutoff. Sometimes there are, but rarely. I would be very surprised. I don't believe Wharton would look at you and say, okay, you must have 8 years of experience, and anything less than that, you're not going to get in or something. It's nothing like that. It's more relative to your overall experience, how your resume would show your potential for leadership, and of course, the normal things that people look at. And I'll just say this: when we're reading an application in the United States, you're going to have, and again, I'm expanding my answer just for everyone's benefit, but in the U.S., and this is where we might differ from a lot of countries, okay? But most schools are going to practice what's called holistic review, okay? And a holistic review, this gets very confused in the media sometimes, but all this means is that we're taking a multifaceted approach to evaluating you as a candidate for our programs. We're not just looking at your GPA. We're not just looking at a test score and judging you based on one of these two metrics, okay? You might wonder why we ask for so many things. We ask for transcripts, letters of recommendation, statement of purpose, all kinds of, besides the application itself. Some schools want writing samples. I mean, it can get very elaborate. And you might say, my goodness, I'm jumping through a lot of hoops, right? Why? Well, it's precisely because we don't want to simply make one judgment on you based on some test score that you might have had, right? Or based simply on your GPA, right? So it's important to really, when you're looking at a program, thinking about what is its purpose, what do I hope to accomplish in this, and then how can I shape the components of my application to reflect how I am a good fit for this program, right? So for an MBA program, you want to be looking at taking on leadership roles, getting experience in a relevant field, right? And that can be pretty wide. Look, I know people, Wharton has accepted members of the military, for example, because that's leadership, right? And that's, you might have been a logistics officer for the Navy or something, right? So in you go. Very good. It's not limited strictly to, Wall Street types, although there's a fair number, I'd say, right? But yeah, I mean, this is what you'd want to look at. So whatever type of program you're doing, I would say take that approach. I'm having trouble hearing you, Violetta. Sorry. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Yeah, that now it's okay. Sorry for that. It's life. Sometimes it happens. Okay. Let's move to next question. What kind of student jobs are available at the GSE?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great question. So, and again, this is going to be very school specific. So you want to reach out to whatever programs you're looking at. But at our school, so we have 23 master's degrees, okay? And the best way to understand Penn GSE, the way I would describe it, is that our faculty are experts in everything from engineering to statistics, to gender studies, to education, we have historians on staff, we have economists, mental health counselors. But what they do is they bring that expertise to bear on some facet of education. Okay? And so, for example, we have a program in, say, policy, right? And this is designed to make you a competent policy analyst. It's grounded in applied statistics. Okay? It's a STEM program, for example. We have 9 STEM designated programs. I know that matters to people sometimes. So, but the type of work then is going to be aligned. Again, I'm going to keep hammering this home, but it's aligned with the purpose of the degree, right? And so if you are hired by the policy program to work for the school, then you're going to be doing work that's related to public policy. If you're hired by the mental health counseling program, then you're going to be doing research, that is, typically, that's related to some aspect of our faculty's research. So the type of work you do is varied. It depends on a lot of factors, sometimes needs of the faculty. Quite often you're working for faculty in this case, right? Sometimes needs of the department. Sometimes it's student initiated. Okay, you might propose something and say, well, I would love to be able to go into this and research that type of thing or do this type of work. And sometimes you can work out an independent study course with that. You can have work out some sort of internship. Most of our, all of our programs, all of our master's degrees have a built-in integrated experiential component. Okay, so this means that as part of your degree, you'll be doing a project that is related to what you're studying. And that's true for every one of our programs. It's not something that you just tack on at the end. It's not just some extra internship that you might do. So for example, we have a program in international education development. And so as part of that program, we will send you 12 to 16 weeks abroad. So so for a Ukrainian, that would mean you're going abroad twice. You're going to the United States, and then we'd send you somewhere that works with your visa, of course, and everything. We work all this out, okay? But that you would do work in the capacity of international development. If you're working in education policy, then you'll do work at City Hall, right? Working with actual legislators and this type of thing. Mental health counseling, well, what do you think they do, right? So you'll be doing that kind of work as part of your clinical hours, right? And so every program has that built in. But then you can also, on top of that, do what we call a graduate assistantship, which is a paid student position. And that's what I was discussing earlier, where you can earn money to live on. You're paid hourly and you get a weekly paycheck. It's cash to you. Do with it as you wish. Most students use it to cover their day-to-day type of expenses like food and phone bill and that sort of thing.
Okay.
There we go. I'm getting pretty good at reading lips though, Yana. I don't know if it's your system or mine. That's okay. I can read the questions. Can you hear me? Okay. No, that's all right.
Oh, what is going on?
As I hear you now. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird cutting in now. That's all right. If you could post the question, I can answer it. I can.
Yeah, I think that you can do it. You still cannot hear me.
I hear you now. At this moment.
Super. I don't know what is happening. And at this point, I have one question I think that would be really beneficial to answer for our students. You have mentioned that students are allowed to work up to 20 hours per week, yeah? But do they allowed to work more hours during their breaks? I mean, during winter break or summer break?
Yeah, that's right. And just to be clear, this is a Penn policy, okay? Other schools will have different policies. The US policy, my understanding, is that if a student is, actually this might be a US policy. If you're enrolled in courses, I believe the limit is 20 hours a week, okay? If you're enrolled in courses. But to your question, when you're not enrolled in courses, you can work up to 40 hours a week, right? When you're not enrolled in courses. Now, Penn, as a university, applicable to all schools, has a policy that they will not let you work more than 28 hours a week in any case. Okay, and that's just a Penn policy. It has more to do with Pennsylvania state tax, I believe, than anything else. But nonetheless, you're going to have all these different weird, quirky things based on the location of the school and whatnot. But yes, the short answer is yes. Typically during a break or I'll say a period of non-enrollment, then you can work more than that.
Okay, thank you for your answer because usually students don't know this.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. We have a lot of questions and I hope that you have enough time to answer them. Okay. If no, just tell me, yeah, and maybe we will address them later or in private conversation with our students. So next one is when I'm applying for need-based scholarship for master's programs, I fill the financial aid application with my financial documents, income statements, not my parents, right?
Well, so the most common answer to a financial aid question is it depends. It depends. If I could just have that on my desk, I would just have that as my go-to answer. Well, you see, it depends. Okay, so when you are applying for need-based aid, okay, this is as an international student. If you are not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, okay, then you are not eligible for need-based aid from the federal government, from the US government, okay? And so that means that you would be relying on school-based need-based aid. So every school has its own policy for that. And so because it's based on the school, it's going to vary very, very much by school and even by program, okay? So even at Penn, wildly different at every school. At every college within the University of Pennsylvania, it's quite different. Some graduate colleges do not offer need-based aid at all. So that's very simple. They don't have it, don't apply, right? Others have a fairly elaborate where you must fill out what's called a CSS profile. It's a very common document, all right? Or they might have you submit financial documentation and this sort of thing. Now, the question was, does this include parental information? Well, it depends, okay? Some schools will require that and some do not. So for example, at the School of Education at Penn, we do not want to know about your parents. We don't care, not relevant, okay? And so we don't ask. And in fact, we don't require any additional documentation. We have a 15-question survey that you fill out, and that is it. It's part of your application for admission. When I wrote it, I wanted it to be easy. I wanted it to be simple, but accurate. Simple, but accurate, okay? And so you just fill it out to the best of your ability, and it's like that. Now, if you're applying to our law school, they're going to have you submit tax returns and the CSS profile, and they will ask for your parental information unless you are over the age of 30, okay? And that's just their policy. They have, think of it this way, right? It's the school's money, so they can determine their own policies. And so you're going to get an entire, it's going to run the gamut. Again, just pay attention to the requirements for each school that you're interested in.
Again.
It's all right. You're coming in faint. Keep going. That's all right. I hear you.
Oh, nice. So I think that it depends. It can be really motto of the applying process to US colleges and for applying for financial aid, because the requirements can really vary. Okay. So Pasha asks, if I'm changing fields, for example, from automotive industry management to data analytics, or even some kind of arts, does it reduce my chances of funding, and how can I strengthen my application?
So there's actually a lot of questions embedded in that. Okay, so Pasha, great question. The answer, of course, is that it depends. But no, here, let me answer this. So again, start at the beginning, right? Think to yourself, okay, right now you are in automotive industry management, let's say, and you want to move into data analytics or culinary arts, you're not sure. That's fine. That's completely fine. In the US, it's very common. This is actually a very common scenario, okay? For example, we admitted a student. I plugged for him though, so I'm happy about this. But we had a student who applied to be a mental health counselor and had been a police officer for 20 years. Okay, this is a career changer. He was retiring from the police force and then wanted to go into mental health counseling. He made an excellent argument in his essay as to why this made sense given his goals, why our program made sense given his goals. And so I would encourage you to do the same thing. If you're interested in culinary arts, let's say, okay, maybe there's not a direct correlation with automotive industry management. Probably not. I mean, maybe there is, I don't know. But whatever your reason, whatever your motivation, tell us about it. Make it make sense, right? Tell us your story. Say, why this change? What's prompted it? What have you done that, show us what you've done so far that where you might be successful. Okay. Now, where it gets challenging sometimes is if you're looking at a program that will lead towards some type of licensure. Okay, this is where it gets a little more strict. Okay, some programs are going to lead towards a professional credential. So, for example, our mental health counseling programs, they lead towards a licensed professional counselor. It's a license which allows you to practice mental health in the United States, allows you to be a therapist, okay? Also for teaching, our programs offer teaching licensure, right? For these types of programs, there are often stricter prerequisites, okay? Because they're trying to meet government mandated criteria, okay? So in general, it's very common for students to do this. In some cases, it's going to be a bit more restrictive and you're going to have to make a bit more of a case and might be a bit more challenging. So for example, if you wanted to be a mental health counselor, but you've taken absolutely no psychology courses whatsoever, you could still be admitted to a program somewhere in the US. I'm sure of it, okay? There are programs designed for that, but that would not be our program. Our program, for example, is going to expect that someone in that field is going to have some experience already so that they can hit the ground running. This is where it becomes very important to pay attention to that program, right? To pay attention to that exact program that you're looking at. But how do you strengthen your application? Again, just relate your journey. Let us understand where you're coming from and why, right? What is this? How does this make sense? What do you hope to do? What are the goals here? When it comes to funding, it's going to vary again by school. But one, I think, common thread is that when we are looking at merit scholarships, right? What does merit even mean? What that means for us, okay, if I had just to boil it down to one thing, I would say merit is essentially an evaluation of how, if this line is perfect fit with a program, how close are you to the line, okay? And the faculty are simply looking at every application that they get, and they're saying, okay, this person's here, this person's here. And so if you can think about it, I'll use the psychology thing again. You have two students, they have the same GPA, they have glowing letters of recommendation. Okay, everything is the same, except one of these students has studied psychology, right? And has done internships related to psychology and has demonstrated over a period of time a deep and sincere commitment to mental health counseling. And the other student is a good student, great student, but they studied maybe sociology. It's related, but it's not quite the same. Well, this person's probably, the person who studied psychology is probably going to get more funding, right? It's closer to the line of fit. I hope that makes sense, right? Kind of give you insight into how when we're looking at an application, that's kind of what we're taking a look at. And so going from automotive to culinary arts, completely doable. Certainly in the United States, I know that. Something like culinary arts is a professional degree, or excuse me, it sort of straddles the line with a vocation, we would call it. And so those are very common, not too difficult. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. There you are. I got you.
So I think that our students are really lucky to have you today with us, because I think that your answers are extremely helpful. Okay, next question. Oh, I see a lot of thanks in the chat. Thank you guys for writing this. It's very lovely of you. Yeah, next one. I'm currently finishing a finance degree in Germany and would like to know just how compatible are finance degrees with more STEM, data science masters.
I see this. Yeah. Well, finance and data science are not the same thing. All right. They're related. But I think that, I guess when you're asking, okay, how compatible are they? In terms of jobs, perhaps, is that the question, or how similar are these degrees? I would say the subject matter is, and I'm not an expert in these fields, to be clear. I don't read for these applications or anything, but I've taken an MBA myself, so it's the closest I've gotten. I would say that these are very separate fields. Maybe not as separate as finance is from an English degree. Okay, a little more related. They're both on the quantitative side, but you're going to learn very different skills in that. And what they both have in common, though, okay, a finance degree, a degree in finance or data science, is what we would consider a specialist degree. It's a specialized master's, as opposed to a general degree like an MBA, right? Where in an MBA, you're going to learn a little data science, you're going to take a stats course, you're going to do a finance course, versus taking an entire course in finance, right? So that's actually a good when you're trying to think about the type of degree you want, that might be a good place to start. Are you looking for more of a general overview type of course like an MBA? Or are you really looking to gain expertise in a more niche field like finance or accounting or something along these lines? It's a good way to think about your skill. And one is not better than the other. Believe me, you'll be very successful in any number of fields like this. Whether you want to go into actuarial work or whatever, you want to think about this type of career, and then. But that's a good way to think about it, right? General versus specialized, this type of thing is helpful. I hope that answered the question.
Okay. Next question. Okay. Yeah. So Anna says, thank you for your presentation. Did I get it right that when we are talking about the PhD programs, it's generally more likely to get the full scholarship than for the masters?
Yes. Yes, with the caveat that, look, now let me just say this. There are thousands of PhD programs, and they are not all created equal. I'm just going to say that. I hope I'm not offending any Americans on the line here. Okay. But what I mean by that is the best, how do I frame this to be diplomatic? The best programs, the strongest programs, the most well-regarded programs are going to fund you for a PhD. They are not going to charge you tuition for a PhD, okay? It does not mean, and be very clear, it does not mean that if you're paying for your PhD, does not mean that that is not a great program. It could be an excellent program, okay? But in general, the top programs are going to pay you to go to the PhD, right? Now, the trade-off there is that makes those programs very, very competitive, okay? So, and I always say that at the master's level, the admission rate is not particularly relevant to the quality of the program. I believe that. I don't believe it's particularly relevant. Well, let me be clear, for specialized master's degrees, I don't think it's particularly relevant, mainly because these are specialized degrees and the denominator is so much smaller in terms of who might be interested in it, right? There's only so many people, for example, that are interested in curriculum development. That's one of our most popular programs, by the way, but it's very specialized, right? We have a program in learning sciences and technology, it's called. It's a STEM program, it's great. It teaches you how to use emerging technology in the classroom and how to build curriculum for both schools and corporations. So we have a fair number of people going into consulting after that, right? But it's very specialized. This is not the type of degree that people are Googling on a regular basis, right? And so what does the admission rate really tell you with that, right? It's basically, whereas I'd say for an undergraduate program where you're applying to the entire university and you have many thousands of applications, yeah, that can give you a better sense, I would say, of the desirability of the degree or something like this. But I would generally stay away from admission rates. Now, looping back to your question about the PhD, because the top PhD programs are fully funded, the admission rate is relevant and it's going to be very low, frankly. Okay, it's going to be quite low. I know for just I don't know what the admission rate is for other colleges at Penn, but I know for ours, for the PhD, specifically 1% to 3% on a given year, okay, of applications. It's one reason to explain it, though, not to be disheartened, is one way to explain it, and maybe this is helpful when you're doing your search, okay? If you're convinced that research is the career you want and you want to go into academia, that's great. I'm glad you've made that decision. I'm glad you've come to that recognition. It can take a while. But the next step is to find mentors and faculty who are able to really help you in that career. Academia, at least in the United States, is highly competitive, very, very competitive. And, it can be kind of challenging for someone to make their name, right? To make a breakthrough in that. One of our junior faculty described it to me as sort of like going to Hollywood and trying to become a star, right? You have all these people coming out with PhDs and doctoral programs, and it can be difficult to make a name for yourself in that specific field. So to the extent that you can find a mentor and someone who's going to really help shape your research and introduce you to their networks and this sort of thing, that's what a PhD program at a top school is going to do. That's the point. That's why you would try to do it. But it also necessarily limits the available number of seats because it's very much, one faculty member can manage maybe up to 3 to 5 PhD students tops, right? It's a lot of work because they're trying to help you. They want to do a good job and they want to give you all the time and attention that you deserve. And so because of that there's a natural limitation let's call it supply of faculty, right? And so it's gonna limit the number of available slots in that case. So the long and short of it, a very long answer to your short question, but I would say this is why it's so critical. This is why it's so critical to find the schools that house the faculty that are most aligned with your research, and to try to develop those relationships. So.
Okay.
I hear you. Yes. You're back.
Yeah. Wow. Nice. It's a surprise. So we have a few more questions. I don't know what is going on with my mic. Just no idea. But anyway, next question is, how is the process for financial aid application different in public universities versus private ones?
Yeah, there are some differences. And so, good question. The main difference is that private universities generally have more latitude with how they determine scholarship eligibility and then how they pay their scholarships, okay? Quite often public universities, so for example, we are sometimes confused with our public counterpart, which is Penn State, okay? So there's Pennsylvania State University, which is a public state-run school, and we are the University of Pennsylvania. I know it's quite confusing, but we're the private one, right? And so using these as an example, the Pennsylvania State University, Penn State, think football. They're very American football. They're very, very famous for their football team. Sports, very famous for sports. We're famous for, academics, let's say, or there's a bit of a difference there, right? So at any rate, the state school is going to be subject to state regulations and state laws, and because they're funded in part through tax dollars, right? They're funded in part through tax subsidies and this type of thing, whereas private schools are funded through our endowment and tuition and various other things. We're not subject to all of the same regulations. I mean, there's some overlap, but so generally schools have a bit more leeway. What does that mean to a student? Well, it means that we can be a bit more, at a private school, you can be a bit more creative in how we award. We can choose to spend dollars. We're not as subject to the political, I don't want to say interference, but political whims of the state house, right? So politicians may say, well, we want to limit scholarships for X, Y, and Z, and public schools may have to abide by that, whereas private schools don't, because it's our money, right? So if we want to award it to Ukrainian students, then we will, and we do, by the way. So all that's good.
Nice. So, guys, we are kind of run out of time. So, 3 last questions.
Okay.
I hope no offense here, right? Pasha says, do grad funding committees favor younger applicants with recent academic records over mid-career international students? If so, are there funding paths or programs that support older students?
Okay. You were cutting in and out, but I think the question, I know it's okay, Yada. It's the tech. Something's going on with the tech. I think the question was, if you're a mid-career professional, am I at a disadvantage to younger applicants? Is that the gist? Did I understand that right? Okay. So it depends. Hey, it depends. But here's why it depends. All right. And here's what it depends on. It really depends on the purpose of the program. I can give you an example at my school, for example, where you have to be a mid-career professional to be even considered for admission. And so in that case, someone coming directly out of undergrad, or someone who's young in their career would never be admitted to, for example, our executive doctorate program in higher ed management, or our, as the name suggests, a mid-career doctorate, right? That's one of our programs. So there are programs that are designed specifically for mid-career professionals. And I would say that, for example, some of the professional doctorates, as opposed to a PhD, are often designed for mid-career professionals in that sense too. And then at the same time, and I said it earlier, but master's degrees in the US are often used for career changers. It's quite common that you'll have someone with who has gone down one path. I mentioned the police officer earlier. This person has spent 20 years as a cop, but now is a mental health, now he's a therapist, right? How did he do it? Well, he got a master's, that's how, right? And so it's very common for people to do that. He was certainly mid-career, middle-aged indeed. One thing in the US, it's never too late. Now, is there some bias towards younger people on the PhD side? Sometimes, I don't think so. It's never, at least not deliberate. It's just that for a PhD, most students are towards the beginning of their career because that's the purpose of the degree, right? The purpose is to give you that entry level kind of competency in research. But again, I would just look at the type of, again, it goes back to looking at the program and seeing who's in it, who is it designed for. But yeah, we have programs where you cannot be admitted unless you are a mid-career professional. So there's something for everyone.
Okay, I hope that it's clearer now, and I hope that my mic works well. Okay, two last questions. Is it possible to talk to someone from the program I'm planning on applying to so I can figure out whether I'm a good fit? I think that Jason already mentioned that, yes, it is possible. And the question here might just sound kind of like, how is it possible, right? To talk to someone.
Yeah, how? Well, I don't know if you're able to put up that QR code or for our school at least, there are all of our programs, and this is common. So at many schools, there's going to be professional staff that are assigned to manage a program, okay? And we are no different. My office sort of sits on top of all the programs, but each of the individual programs have staff assigned who are experts for that specific program, okay? And we highly encourage you, highly encourage you to speak with our programs. Most admissions offices are going to have a lot of different ways to connect, whether via email or what. But actually, I will, if you bear with me here a second, I'm going to put a link in the chat, if that's okay, Yana. This is now your cup. We're sort of at the tail end of our recruiting season, but this is our events page, for example. And checking, you want to find a school's calendar. It's always a good option to do that, okay? Because every school is going to have lots of different events coming up. And if you were to check this, say in another month or so, you would see quite a few. Options here. And if you bear with me here also, I'm looking for, okay. It's all right. My computer's not helping me. But yes, if you were to reach out, I'm going to give you an email address for us here.
And now, guys, you can see the website screen.
Oh yes, thank you for putting that up. Yeah, and if you follow that QR code, you should be able to fill out a survey, and this will help you. You can choose if you're not sure which program. Again, you'll see the full list of programs. If you're not sure, you'll still get general communications from the school itself. This will put you in touch with our faculty and staff. You'll get regular communications and updates from Penn GSE. I would encourage you to do this with any school that you're interested in. Even if you're not sure if you're interested, it doesn't hurt, right? I promise we will only lightly spam you, okay? It's not going to be overwhelming.
Okay, yeah. And I think that we have already answered the last question, yeah? So we have it kind of like, I wanted to ask if it is possible to reach out to you to ask a more detailed questions about switching the specializations. Thank you in advance. So I think that we have already given you the opportunity to do so. Yep, that's it. Okay, we did a really good job, I think. And Jason did a really good job answering all your questions. Thank you, everyone, for being so active. And thank you, Jason, for taking some time for us tonight. We really appreciate it. Yeah, that's it. So I think that it's time to say goodbye. So,
All right.
Jason, have the good rest of your day. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope to see you next Thursday.
All right.
Bye.